Hey listeners, welcome back to another out-of-a-world news story with Unraveled Tales. Wife spends the wedding anniversary day with her boyfriend in a hotel room without her husband's knowledge. But she was shocked and scared when hotel boy gave her an anniversary gift and left. How he know about her anniversary date? I hope you will enjoy this. What in the hell do you mean we're out of gas? It was more a shriek than a question, as a panicked Paula spun her head left and right to look for something, or someone. The move whipped her jet black hair one way, then the other. She instinctively reached up to make sure it was still on straight. The scream just added to Bart's confusion as his silver BMW coupe sputtered to a stop at the curb of a busy boulevard lined by some of the city's most notorious motels. The gauge was pegged at E. Paula was angry, but Bart was mostly bewildered. He was certain there had been a quarter tank at least when they parked 2 hours earlier, just 5 blocks back. A man who drives a new silver Beamer can afford better than a 20-an-hour love nest out along the strip. So, for all 3 of their weekly trysts so far, Bart took Paula out past these repurposed former Holiday Inns and Howard Johnsons to where the thoroughfare turns nice and sweeps up a small rise. Behind a bolted door at the upscale Summit Inn, they were no longer Bart, an unmarried team leader at a downtown accounting firm, and Paula, the very married administrative assistant on his crew. They became 2 30-something teenagers, ducking their brains out for fun. It was a minor concern that their jobs could be in jeopardy, especially Bart's since he was her supervisor. But they figured they weren't the only illicitly coupled employees. Besides, they were very discreet. At least they were until breaking down in a noticeable car on one of the busiest byways in the city. Bart saw Paula nervously scanning the street, but he did not know exactly why. They were nowhere near their office, nor the part of town where he presumed that she lived. The chance of someone recognizing them was remote, even if they had to wait a while for the TBA truck. Both silently absorbed the old song still playing on the stalled car's radio, a tune warning that the night has 1,000 eyes. Bart was hardly worried. This is a sprawling city of 500,000 people after all, and the couple were together in the respectability of daylight. Paula's gut nodded as she considered something that she deliberately had failed to tell Bart. For her, this city has 2,400 eyes, and at least 600 of them were on duty at that moment. Strange behavior. What had you so frightened? Bart, still perplexed about last week's Out of Gas episode, was even more vexed about Paula's lingering nervous behavior. I told you that's for me to worry about, she replied dismissively, glancing out the window of room 422. This was week 4. They always met on Wednesday afternoons when co-workers would not miss them. That was the time they were supposed to be in the field, checking on several clients' needs, not shacked up to satisfy their own. It was always at the Summit Inn, which felt isolated and safe. Bart swore that she was the first he ever took there. In fact, he promised that she was the first lover ever from work, and he insisted that she also was the first who was married. You think your husband wouldn't recognize you in that black wig? Paula dropped the drape, climbed to straddle him on the bed, gave her bright blonde hair a toss, and drilled his eyes. I told you that we never ever discuss my husband. I'm not afraid, whoever he is, Bart continued. If he's not man enough to satisfy you, he's not man enough to scare me. We never, ever talk about him. She declared again, angrily emphasizing each word while abruptly retrieving her business-appropriate dress off the carpet. We're done for today. So this session ended short. Bart agreed to go, figuring it was prudent to sacrifice this week to her ire in the name of preserving other weeks to come. Wig in place, Paula cautiously led the way to the BMW. This time it was Bart's turn to shriek. What the duck? Mindful of the previous week's fuel disaster, he had double-checked the gas gauge before parking behind the Summit. He had a half tank then, but now, somehow, it showed full. Had Paula's curvy charm simply addled his brain 2 weeks in a row? A weird coincidence is what he called it. Paula's mind spun. This didn't seem particularly ominous, yet she could imagine the words her husband often brought home from work. There is no such thing as a coincidence. A husband called Bick. With her guard now up a little, she retrieved her own car and returned to her office for a sort of precautionary pit stop. After a quick brush of her teeth and a scan in the mirror for hickeys, it was back home to Bick. That was not an ordinary moniker, nor for that matter her husband's real name. He didn't much like it. Bick had earned it in a gruesome episode that conferred enduring local fame. He had been an ordinary off-duty cop, waiting in a bank line to deposit a check, when two psychopaths with pistols took over the place for money and more. They were dragging the prettiest teller toward the door when the officer, known until that moment as Harold, sprang forward, wielding only a ballpoint pen. A few furious seconds later, the hostage was safe, and the surprised robber who had been holding her was writhing in agony, having sacrificed his right eye in a failed attempt to keep his pistol. Harold's first official act as Bick was to use that gun to trade shots with the other bandit, who fell dead outside the loan department. Bick almost died too, bleeding heavily from a wound in his side. Now, 10 years later, he sometimes still made headlines, as a star detective on the homicide squad. He can read people, Paula knew, but not always her. In their 8 years of marriage, she enjoyed success in keeping a few benign secrets. That emboldened her to think she could fool Bick with her first malignant one, too. Bick was not the brute that the bank publicity might have suggested. The few people he let close would call him mild, thoughtful, uncommonly patient, even philosophical. If catching bad guys was his first objective, fixing them was his second, when feasible. He figured a compassionate nudge or two could be as effective as harsh punishment to put a petty offender back on track. He was especially impressed with the few miscreants of his acquaintance, usually among his informants, who somehow managed to rehabilitate their own ways before reaching a point of no return. When Paula arrived home about 5:30, Bick was baking pork chops. He didn't always cook and wasn't always home so early, but he had been on call overnight Tuesday and was summoned at 2 a.m. In their kitchen, Paula rubbed his shoulders and asked for details. The reply was spare, as always. Young man, cheating wife, suicide, carbon monoxide. Paula felt a guilty jolt of adrenaline. Suicides didn't usually make the news, so she would have no way to test whether Bick was telling the truth, or perhaps just baiting her. But no. If he really suspected her of straying, surely the made-up story would have at least had the guy killing the wife and her lover. While the gas tank episodes bothered her, the explanation was simple and harmless. Bart could be a bit of an airhead. Most comforting was that Bick's affection for her had not diminished a bit. His kiss was still full and warm. The smile was genuine, and the chops in the oven were her favorite dish. She realized that her affection for Bick had not changed either. She felt a thrill in that kiss and that tweak. She loved that he knew just what pleased her, in the oven or in the bed. She paused to contemplate not the gravity of her infidelity, but its strange lack of weight. Bick provided everything she wanted. And, she thought before flirtations with Bart got out of control, Bick also provided everything she needed. Update: the cheater's rationalization. Paula recognized all along that she had foolishly allowed herself to be swept away by nothing more than the lustful affirmation of a guy. Not a better guy. Not even as good, but fresh. Until Bart flattered her into that bed at the Summit Inn, she always figured that intimate experiences with a half-dozen past boyfriends had sufficiently satisfied her curiosity to keep her forever faithful to Bick. She did not intend to start the affair. Paula was certain of that. But she also was certain that she was not ready to end it. Not yet. She would never leave Bick for anyone, let alone Bart. But for now, there was still a special rush in Bart's arms. To the extent that she had any plan at all, she expected that the excitement would fade, and she would happily return forever to monogamy, and finally start a family. In a twisted way, she even saw herself as considerate of Bick. She never resisted his lovual advances, which, despite the detective's long and irregular duty hours, averaged about 2 or 3 times a week. She insisted that Bart use rubbers, and, most importantly in her rationalization, she would never do anything with Bart that she did not do regularly with Bick. Her biggest concession to Bick was making sure he never found out. Hence the black wig, which at any distance made her look like someone else altogether. She kept a coat and sunglasses at work that she had never let her husband see. She wore no special lingerie for Bart. She insisted that he never wear any fragrance, nor leave any marks. They would depart the office separately on Wednesday afternoons, and she would stash her car in a busy Walmart parking lot a mile away before they continued together in the BMW. Paula's greatest fear was that Bart might be stopped for a traffic violation with her riding in the car, or be involved in a collision, or run out of gas and block traffic. Not every cop knew Bick, and relatively few knew her. But if one who did ever spotted her wearing an obvious wig in a strange man's car, well, she simply could not allow that to happen. Bart did not know whose wife he was betting. He might have recognized the nickname Bick, or perhaps not. Paula refused to tell him, figuring it would betray her husband's dignity and maybe even scare Bart away. He had made casual inquiries about it at the office, and was surprised at how little anyone there knew of her home life. Paula had followed Bick's suggestion that for her safety she should use her maiden name professionally and tell only a couple of her closest girlfriends at work about her spouse. Was she actress enough, Paula wondered, to watch for suspicions on Bick's part without actually generating some? She decided there was no cause for special vigilance. Surely she would sense any early signs. But lies always stir at least a little paranoia in otherwise honest people. Was it significant that Bick had increased the frequency of their romance in recent weeks, or that he often enticed her on Tuesday and Thursday nights, but it seemed like never after she returned home on Wednesdays? Paula did not spend much time thinking about what her husband would do if he found out. She was too careful and too clever to be caught. Oddly for a cop, he did not seem to have a particularly suspicious nature at home. And oddly for the husband of a beautiful woman, he did not seem particularly jealous. He trusted her completely. Nothing aggravated her guilt more than knowing that. In the very worst case, she figured, she could hold on to Bick with a flood of apologies and affection. She knew he loved her too much to hurt her, too much to leave her. She could explain away her only indiscretion. Well, a series of indiscretions, but with just one man. Bick would be hurt but understanding. Since Bart meant only shallow pleasure, Paula knew she could promise to abandon the affair and really mean it. Happy anniversary. A glance at her calendar made Paula gasp. Next Wednesday would fall on the 24th of the month. It was her wedding anniversary. Bick would expect loving that night. Besides, she was not hard enough to disrespect the magic date by cheating. Wait, no, never mind. She misread it. Never. The 24th was Thursday, not Wednesday. Okay then, let the show go on. The passion had not yet peaked in room 218. Bart was Paula when both were startled by a firm rap on the door. Room service, a male voice declared. Bart peered warily out the peephole to see a boyish bellman standing behind a cart that was covered by a white tablecloth and topped with a large bottle and an ice bucket. The guy knocked again. Better to answer the door than invite undue attention, the couple decided. Paula hid her nudity under a sheet and Bart found pants and a t-shirt before unlocking. I have your anniversary champagne and cheese tray, the kid announced, pausing to take in the unmade bed and musky air. We didn't order that, Bart declared. Oblivious to this being Paula's anniversary eve, he didn't know how truly strange the scene was. Paula realized it, of course, and gave a low gasp. The moment seemed frozen for a couple of beats before the intruder looked down and mumbled, "Shit." With a shrug and the upturned hands of exasperation, he waved a card labeled Room 318, then departed. Paula's heart pounded. Let's go, she declared, not caring that Bart's unmet need remained quite evident through his slacks. At home, her eyes teared up in relief when a relaxed, smiling husband embraced her lovingly at the door. She noticed him noticing her tears and offered an explanation. I'm just so excited about our anniversary tomorrow. He suggested they get a nice hotel room to celebrate the next night. How about the Regency West with its 4-star rating? She tried not to react. It was next door to the Summit Inn. Paula desperately searched Bick's eyes to see if he might be searching hers. But nothing. Mounting coincidences. Paula felt as if her gut was unraveling. Peculiar things kept happening around her, but they made no sense. They certainly did not mean that Bick was onto her. In fact, his demeanor suggested quite the opposite. There are no coincidences, she kept thinking to herself. But could she even call these coincidences? For Bart, the unraveling was more in his head. What in the hell was wrong with her? Life is full of meaningless little twists, after all. Yet she took each of them so seriously. It was ruining his fun. Thursday night's marital anniversary passion with Bick at the Regency West was possibly unmatched since the couple's honeymoon. There was nothing held back by either. Nothing she ever gave Bart was not replicated with Bick in the hotel bed, and sofa and countertop and shower, in this one night of celebration. As she lay beside Bick, panting, Paula could not reconcile her internal conflict. She had never loved Bick more. Yet she didn't feel finished with Bart. There was no understanding it. She found peace in imagining a return to the Regency West with Bick on the same night next year. When Bart would be just a faded memory, the risk of discovery would be gone, and her conscience would be healed. Update. 1. 6 days later, she lay panting in that other hotel again, with that other man. It made a full set this time. They were strolling back to the parking lot, hand in hand, when Paula's knees started to buckle. Snugged in close to the passenger side of Bart's BMW was a very plain, deep gray Ford Fusion. Cheap wheels, basic seats, just like the Detective Bureau sedan that sat in her driveway every night. It had no visible emergency lights nor apparent police radio antenna. But neither did Bick's. She instinctively scanned the lot and then examined the Fusion, looking for clues. There was nothing to indicate it was Bick's car. Nothing to indicate it wasn't. Bart recognized that she was distracted again with no clue as to why. Nor did he understand why she sighed with such relief as he backed away from his spot. The Fusion, she noticed, did not have home state plates. If anything, Paula seemed uncommonly relaxed on the drive back to her car. The Fusion scare provided reassurance that her imagination had been running away with her. But the comfort was short-lived. Arriving home at a usual time, she spotted Bick's indistinguishable gray Fusion in the driveway, but with out-of-state Louisiana license plates. She was certain the car at the Summit Inn had California tags. But what was she to make of the fact that both have black numbers and letters on a white background, with the state's names written in stylized red? Paula was never more nervous going through her own front door. Then came the smell. Pork chops again. A sweet embrace. A loving kiss. Mundane chatter over their dinner. She mustered the courage to ask Bick about the license change. He explained that he and his partner had been on surveillance and that the department kept plates from several states for such assignments. Okay, she thought. Maybe it really had been an unmarked police car at the summit. But it wasn't Bick's. The plate colors were, well, a coincidence. Courtney P. Gladholder. The brain is the principal love organ, of course, and Paula's was muddled. A part of her wanted to dump Bart right away. A part of her wanted to move the romance to some other hotel. A part of her just wanted him inside her any way she could get it. She decided to keep the next Wednesday date. Maybe it would be the last. Maybe not. She continued to be comforted by the lack of signals from her husband. That is, unless she actually had been getting signals from her husband. Muddled was the right word. It didn't help that the illicit lovers' passion cycles were especially in sync this week. Their usual blissful 2 hours stretched beyond an exquisite 3. On the way home, running late, she called Bick's cell. He didn't answer. She knew that if he was busy, he couldn't. Nothing unusual. The driveway was empty, the kitchen too. No pork chops tonight. Nothing was out of place except a newspaper clipping sitting on the kitchen counter. Dated 4 years before, its headline read, "Deputy Police Chief Survives Shooting." Why, she wondered, would Bick have left it there? Paula well remembered the incident. Courtney P. Gladholder, who had been promoted beyond patrol duties a decade before, spotted a wanted car and reverted into street cop mode. An exchange of shots left him with a torn femoral artery. Had Bick not been close and used his belt as a tourniquet, the story said Gladholder would have bled to death on the street. The article's accompanying picture of Gladholder looked oddly familiar. She vaguely recalled him from the ceremony where he and Bick received commendations. But it felt as if she had seen him more recently. Probably not at any police function. With nerve damage to his leg, Gladholder had retired from the force. Giving the clipping little thought, Paula ascended the stairs to the master bedroom. It, too, seemed normal, but the master closet was not. She saw a 6-foot gap on the rod where Bick's clothes should hang. Feeling the floor falling from under her feet, Paula called Bic's cell again and convulsed when she heard its ringer just a few feet away. It was plugged into a charger on a table along his side of the bed. Or what used to be his side of the bed. Peeking from beneath the phone was a business card that helped answer her weeks of mysteries. At a distance, she recognized in horror the familiar logo of the Summit Inn. Looking closer, she focused on the name. Courtney P. Gladholder, manager. It was as though fate put a tight grip around Paula's chest. She could barely breathe. She cried, "No, no, no!" Then she called out Bic's name, thinking, praying, that he was waiting nearby to hear her explanation. There was no response. Update 2. A desperate wife, shaking almost too much to dial, she called Benny Wickerhouse, who for a year had been Bic's partner. She barely got out a word before he took an audibly deep breath and said, "Paula, call Captain Lancashire." Then Benny hung up. She tried again, but he wouldn't pick up. Jack Lancashire, the homicide commander, had gone home for the night. The communication center promised to get a message to him. But he never called. Paula could not think of anyone else to help find her husband. She barely knew anybody at the department. Bic didn't bring his work home and did not take his personal life to work. His parents were dead. He had no siblings. Paula had been his best friend. He always told her that he didn't need another. She startled herself with a realization that as lonely as she felt on this night, it must be so much worse for Bic. Surely he would not hurt himself? Or Bart? He will be back tomorrow. He will be back tomorrow. He will be back tomorrow. She repeated to herself between sobs, over and over, until she fell into a fitful sleep. She was at Lancashire's door at police headquarters even before he arrived the next morning. He motioned for her to follow him into his office. His solemn expression and the fact he never called her back seemed to confirm that Bic had filled him in. "Where is he?" she cried, getting to the point before the captain said a word. "I have to talk to him." Lancashire, deeply experienced with hysterical people, had little sympathy for one of her own making. In a flat voice, he said, "You can't." "My God, is he okay? Is he hurt?" Her last word wasn't out before Lancashire shook his head and replied, "He's fine, but he's gone." "Gone? Gone where? I've got to get to him." "Paula, remember the JTTF?" "Kind of." "The Joint Terrorism Task Force. It's an FBI project that uses federal agents and local police as a team." "Uh-huh." "One of our officers on it took the ill and Bic stepped forward last week to fill in." "I was surprised up until Gladholder told me why." "You do remember Courtney Gladholder?" She whimpered. "A day or two after Bic volunteered, he told me his story and asked us to give him 3 more days to change his mind," the captain told her. "He said there might still be time for you to confess and ask for mercy. Apparently that never happened." Paula pulled her chin up from her chest long enough to nod her head. "I'll do whatever it takes," she insisted. "It was a mistake. I'm so sorry. If I could just see him, talk to him. I love him, and I know he loves me. He left his cell phone behind. Do you have his new number? Where is he staying?" "Please?" Lancashire's stern look deepened. "He will be traveling a lot. Undercover. It's at least a 6-month commitment. Much of the time he will be, well, let's just say, out of town." Scribbling a note, he said, "This is Bic's emergency contact number at the FBI where you can leave a message. I can guarantee he will get it. Of course, I cannot guarantee anything else." Once the silence in the room became too much of a burden, Paula, still sobbing, rose and thanked Lancashire. Looking back as she left, she could not gauge whether she saw any pity in his eyes or just contempt. "There are no coincidences," she whispered to herself as she stumbled across the police parking lot through a small sea of unmarked Ford Fusions in several colors. Some were dark gray, but only the one now parked next to her car had a black wig sitting on its roof. Update 3. After exhausting her remaining vacation with 6 straight days of crying, Paula reluctantly returned to work. Her duck buddy Bart surely would be angry. She had not answered his dozens of calls, texts, and emails. He did not know where she lived, and of course he had no idea what had happened. His back was to the open doorway when she stepped into his office. "We're done," she declared. Her voice was soft but firm. Wounded soft, not lovey soft. As he spun in his chair, she spouted out answers before he had a chance to ask questions. It was a mistake. A stupid fling. I don't love you. I don't want you. I know the office is so small that I still have to work for you, but I'm sending out applications this week, and you damned well better give me a good reference. Silence hung for a while before Bart responded. He knows? Paula turned away, partly to hide her tears and partly to enforce the promise she had made to herself not to humiliate Bick by discussing him in any way with her lover. Well, now her ex-lover. Does he know who I am? Is he mad? Should I be scared? Paula looked back, sizing him up in disbelief that she threw away her perfect life for this. I don't know exactly what he knows or exactly how he feels. We haven't talked. I'm sure he must know who you are. I'm not saying you should be scared, but if you knew who he was, you would be. So who is he? Bart asked with urgent concern. None of your business. That's not fair. He knows who I am, but I don't know who he is. How do I defend myself? You don't, asshole, Paula said as she began moving back toward the door. What I did was my fault and I accept the blame for it. But seducing married women, and you did know I was a married woman, is dangerous business. I have just one piece of advice for you, and you should listen to it very carefully. There are no coincidences. Waiting and waiting. At home, Paula spent what felt like hours every day checking and rechecking her cell phone for texts or emails. When it would ring, she lunged for it. But there was nothing from Bick. Wickerhouse and Lancashire provided no insight and seemed to barely tolerate her calls. She must have left a dozen messages on the FBI emergency contact line. The operator accepted them dutifully, but without result. Paula was eating tuna out of a can in her kitchen, imagining that Bick was baking pork chops for dinner, when the daydream was interrupted by knocking on her front door. Bick wouldn't knock. Would he? The stranger on the stoop handed her a large envelope. Her heart pounded as she expected to hear the words, "You've been served." But the man departed without uttering a syllable. Her hand trembling, Paula dumped the contents onto the kitchen table, assorted financial documents and a note in Bick's handwriting. It read, "This will be helpful to you. The bank account and credit cards are still open. My paycheck will still be directly deposited. I will withdraw $3,000 for living expenses on the 15th of each month." There was no signature, no emotion, no mention of her betrayal, nor of a divorce, nor of forgiveness. No address or phone number. No indication when or whether he might come home. The detective's wife did spy one clue. There were maybe a dozen little oval wrinkles on the page, each about the size of a teardrop. Paula added about a dozen of her own. Insights on an ego duck. Her life slowly regained a semblance of structure in that she was working, eating, and achieving occasional success with sleep. But the unrelenting weight of her situation was crushing, sometimes almost literally. At random moments, she might find herself struggling just to catch a deep breath. Food had no taste. Music had no beat. When she tried to watch TV, the show she saw on every channel was the same. A fuzzy review of the collapse of her life, played over and over in bleak black and white. She felt no urge to reach out to others for comfort. Not to her mother, 500 miles east, nor her brother, half that far south. Not to friends who had once openly admired Paula's obvious marital bliss. None of them had known her secret. Nobody but Bart, and her feelings about him were dead. Not love. She was never remotely close to in love with him. But not hate either. He might be a pig, but she knew that she had willingly, even eagerly, joined him in the slop. Bart had been just a thrill. Yet there was no thrill in the memory. 2 weeks into her despair, facing the prospect of another lonely night. As if her circumstances were not bad enough, a police spouse begins each day with the real possibility of ending it widowed. The risk may be recognized with an extra embrace or a long goodbye kiss on the way to the door. But for Paula, there were no more embraces, no more kisses. Just the fear that Bick could die today without knowing how sorry she was. How much she loved him. Only him. And without an opportunity for her to seek absolution. That fear, more than everything else, led Paula to seek counseling. It was not with the police psychologist, but a woman that he had recommended. Twice a week, Paula met with her for an hour. Absent the husband, the counselor could hardly assess the prospects for the only thing now driving Paula's heart. A reconciliation. If there were only limited insights to the couple's future, the sessions drew out some telling ones about Paula's own past. Her teen years were frustrating, marked by too much acne and too little shape development. Her beauty bloomed late in college, and despite semi-serious relationships there, some deep part of her longed to recover the missed years of high school dating and young male adulation. Bick, while truly being her knight in shining armor, also was a subconscious competitor, diverting too much attention from her at gatherings of friends and relatives. The counselor explained that Paula was dry for a spark from a smooth talker like Bart. This new ability to grasp the motivation for her infidelity provided a small but perceptible lift in her spirits. The sun shone brighter and the breeze tasted fresher as she emerged from the entrance of the counseling office and toward her red Hyundai Elantra, just a few steps away. Running late, Paula had been fortunate to find an empty parking spot right outside the front door. She vividly recalled pulling right in and her tires bumping the parking block hard. So how was it that her car was now backed into the same spot? She always hated backing up. She didn't think she had ever backed into a parking place in her life. Update 4. A hopeful sign. A fresh flood of tears soaked the front of her sweater as she climbed behind the steering wheel. She was still receiving Bick's signals. He must have used his spare key to sit right in this car, in this seat, just within the past hour. She climbed out and stood, suddenly aware that he might still be nearby. Maybe hiding. Maybe watching her reaction. A scan left to right revealed nothing. But how do you spot a surveillance expert? She realized that she would see him only if he wanted. Paula was so overwhelmed that had traffic not been light, she might never have reached her office safely. Her new office. True to what she had told Bart, she found another job in her old line. The miles between the former lovers brought her comfort, although whatever attraction she ever felt for him was long gone anyway. She presumed that Bick's pranks during the affair were a sort of warning, a way to communicate that he knew without actually telling her he knew. And, oh God, how she wished she had heeded those signals from the start. She bit her lip as she considered the remote possibility that if Bick had seen the affair stop quickly, their marriage might even have endured without a confrontation. But what could be the purpose of today's prank? She settled on two possibilities that melded into one. He wanted her to know he was still watching, which implied that he still cared. And given where her car had been, he probably knew she was receiving counseling. When Paula walked outside the next morning, she glanced up and down the street. Was he watching? Since yesterday, she felt his eyes on her all the time. What should be creepy was instead oddly reassuring. She allowed herself the fantasy that if she stumbled on the sidewalk, he would emerge from nowhere in time to catch her. Just as he must have tried to stop her when she was stumbling with Bart. More weeks passed without another sign. Paula despaired. Had he lost interest? Had she misread his turning around her car? Or had she just been wrong about the way she had parked it? Was there some way to construe it as a goodbye? She called his FBI contact number regularly, if less frequently. At police headquarters, Bick's partner and boss said that since they were not part of the task force, they had no contact with him. She wasn't certain they would tell her either way. Perhaps, and she hung her hopes on this, Bick was out of town on assignment, as Lankersham said. It would suggest that her husband had made his presence known on a visit back. His assignment would last at least 6 months, his boss had told her. 2/3 of that had already passed. Update 5. Terror knocks. It was 5 months to the day of Bick's departure that someone banged on Paula's door about 7:15 a.m. Her racing heart beat even faster when she peeked out a window to see 2 men in suits on her doorstep, one with a small gold shield clipped to his belt and a leather credential case in his hand. She held her breath before opening. 5 seconds, 10. It was as if by stalling she was prolonging Bick's life. They banged again and she relented. The taller FBI man first verified that she was Bick's wife. "He's been hurt," the man said, adding words that Paula initially did not hear. She was busy processing the implication that the love of her life was at least alive. The shorter agent reached out his hand to hers in reassurance. "This is not life-threatening and not crippling," he said. "His right femur is broken and is being repaired by surgery as we speak. That's the thigh bone," he clarified. "I can tell you he was not shot, and except for abrasions, he has no other wounds. I cannot tell you what happened or where, except that he is abroad. If there are no complications, he will be stateside later this month. How can I reach him? Paula asked. The taller agent stepped in after his partner hesitated. You can't, ma'am. On his instructions. You remain his next of kin, which is why we are here. But he left explicit orders that you not reach out to him. We've never had this happen, but it's none of our business. Headquarters has forwarded a written message from him addressed to you. He pulled an envelope from his coat pocket and handed it to her, feeling compelled to add, We have not read it. The shorter agent said, I'm sorry, as the two turned back through the shadows toward their car. Naturally, it was another dark Ford. Paula set the message on her kitchen table, staring intently as if trying to read right through the envelope. Her eyes never left it as she popped a fresh K-cup into her Keurig. For 153 days, coffee had been her closest companion. Now, with her fingers wrapped around a steaming cup of her best friend, she prayed to find encouragement in Bick's words. Any tiny encouragement would do. She tore off the end of the envelope. Meet my plane or not. Your choice. Lancashire will call with details. Words don't get much more neutral than that. Paula screamed in joy, knowing that at least she would finally see him. But what would she say? What would he say? How could she explain betraying the most perfect husband she ever imagined? Having shared what she pledged would always be only his? How could she describe the addictive, cheap thrills without pushing him away forever? Make Bick understand that Bart was never a threat to steal her away, and in no way was ever his equal. Hardest of all, how could she convince him that if given a chance she would be loyal forevermore? She cried herself to sleep for the first time in weeks. While she had arisen every day to the possibility of facing Bick, the certainty of a confrontation, and soon, left her stomach in a knot. The phone call from Lancashire came 2 weeks later. Delta 898 arrives at 5:05 p.m. Thursday, was all he said. He still sounded disgusted. Her reply was just as terse. Thanks. The meeting would happen tomorrow. For a short while, what to wear seemed as important as what to say. Bick would, after all, see her before they spoke. Flirty? No! That would flaunt her transgressions. Businesslike? Too cold. Slacks and a blouse? Too androgynous. She finally opted for a casual dress and flat shoes, easy and comfortable like the marriage she lost and desperately hoped to regain. It was at the security checkpoint for Terminal B that she spotted him coming from the gate. A silhouette in the distance of a man in sweats on crutches. A chiseled fellow in a dark suit walked beside, tugging a maroon suitcase that Paula recognized as part of their set. The urge to throw herself into Bick was strong, but she held back, worried less about sending him sprawling than that he might brush her away. She had been invited here, of course, but for what? Bick gave her an enigmatic smile. Her heart soared. He nodded to his somber travel companion, who nodded back and uttered just 3 words that briefly froze Paula in her steps. Summit Inn, right? Bick nodded again. The Fed and the bag disappeared toward the garage. Hey, hello, Bick, Paula said. Are you okay? He responded by lifting one crutch to demonstrate that he would not fall over. Then came his first spoken words to her in almost a half a year. I have to talk to you. There could not have been a more uncomfortable place to reveal their hearts than the Summit Inn. But that was where Bick asked her to drive him. Courtney Gladholder is going to watch over me, he explained, in the longest sentence spoken during the ride. She nodded, knowing that he knew that she knew the significance of the name. The hotel arrival was harder than she expected. Given Bick's condition, she used the parking valet. She didn't recognize him, but was that a smirk on his face or just her imagination? She knew the concierge on site for sure. No smirk there, just eyes that seemed preoccupied with his own shoes. Paula shuddered when she realized that since the Fed had come separately with Bick's suitcase, the couple was arriving without luggage, just as she and Bart had. Humiliated, her gut wanted to scream out, "This one is my husband!" Her brain vetoed the urge. The front desk was no problem. Bart had always checked them in while she waited out of sight. But the elevator. Damn, the memories of those elevator rides. Her knees had trembled with anxiety on every trip up, but nothing like they were shaking now. In the hallway, she watched Bick walking beside her and figured that if she collapsed here, a man on crutches could never catch her. As he stopped at the door of his room, she dared to hope their room. Paula drew back, studying the numbers 1089 glued to the door. She jumped for an instant when his voice broke the silence. "You've never been in this one," he said intuitively. Courtney checked. It wasn't one of the tryst rooms, yet it was. In a way, they all were. Her eyes darted around. The same wallpaper, the same drapes, the same smoke detector on the ceiling over the bed, the same deep red duvet that could slide so easily to the floor, the same couch with a back that conveniently stopped waist high, the same shower that was big enough for two. Vibrations from her knees had migrated up to her chest, now fluttering wildly. It's one thing to be beyond denying your crime, but quite another to be forced to join the victim back at the scene. Bick's face held no emotion. This, she figured, was the deadpan that many a suspected killer had seen across the table in an interview room downtown. Probing eyes, closed lips, and ears that seemed to cant forward to intercept any sound. Bick leaned one crutch against a wall and hobbled on the other to line up for landing on a chair. But first, he reached beneath his left pants leg and pulled a Glock Model 26 from its ankle holster. Paula gasped and recoiled. Bick stared at her as if she had lost her mind. With practiced hands, he released a magazine of 9mm rounds from the handle and tugged back the slide to clear the remaining cartridge from the chamber. "Damn thing gets heavy," he explained, stowing the pistol and its ammunition inside a drawer. He eased his way down to the seat, propped his lame leg on an ottoman, and drilled her eyes before asking, "Where do we start?" Final update. Confessions. Paula had spent months choreographing this moment, imagining the expressions and gestures and words to use. But overwhelmed by this man, by this setting, and by the depth of her guilt, she couldn't remember a single bit of it. It was pure improvisation when she dropped to her knees, grasped one of his hands with both hers, and shed tears that filled the eyes she could not seem to lift from the floor. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you. Only you. Only you. Only you. Only you." Did she say it 10 times? 30? When Paula dared look upward to meet his gaze, it took away her breath. Bick was there in body, but not spirit. He was staring right through her, not glaring, staring. It was as if whatever he was thinking was barely connected, if at all, to what she was saying. Bick, talk to me, Bick." His eyes focused once again on her face, searching as if the answers to his questions were somehow painted on her skin. Sobbing, she blurted out, "If only I had recognized your signals, your tricks. Oh, God, you were trying to stop me, and I was too stupid to realize." Bick shook his head slowly, mumbling in a voice almost too low to hear. "What kind of signals?" he was asking, in a tone that implied he might really not know what she meant. Not what it seemed. Their last time together, life had been good, at least outwardly. If Paula had been struggling with guilt, or Bick with suspicion, the other had not realized it. But now, after months of suffering and solitude, the couple realized their old familiarity was gone. They were mired in Paula's betrayal. Neither knew what to say next. "I'm sorry," Paula whispered. "I'm so sorry. It meant nothing to me. I was so stupid. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I cannot go on with my life without asking for it, begging for it." Then she wept while searching in vain for sympathy in Bick's solemn expression. "I never loved anyone but you. I can never love anyone but you. I would do anything to keep you." Then a long silence. A rap on the door startled them both. Paula answered it to find a face she had sometimes seen in the office behind the Summit Inn registration desk. The face from that news clipping. "Hello, Paula. May I come in?" Gladholder asked. His tone seemed warm to her, even though they had met only once, at the hero ceremony that now seemed a lifetime before. He moved to the couch, wearing a compassionate smile that evoked calm. Of those who knew about her sin, Paula thought, only her psychologist had felt kinder. "You told her yet?" Gladholder asked Bick. Paula was confused. It was she who owed the explanation, after all. No, Vic responded. Paula's gut tensed, realizing the men shared some kind of secret. I don't know how to do this, her husband mumbled. Gladholder sighed and sat for at least 30 seconds, with his eyes locked on Bix. Do you want me to start? Bick nodded, then reached for his handkerchief to dab his own tears. Paula, your husband saved my life. Not might have or could have, but did. That creates a special bond. He felt like the son I never had. I wanted to watch out for him, and even a retired deputy chief has a lot of juice on the force. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Gladholder paused and turned to Bick for permission to continue. After I was shot, I spent 2 weeks in the hospital. As you probably know, Bick visited every day at first, when my prognosis was uncertain. But even after my recovery was assured, he kept coming around. My wife quickly realized why. It was a floor nurse named Ellie. I didn't see it for myself till the doctors backed off my OxyContin. Bick would stop by about 2:30 every afternoon and disappear when her shift ended at 3. I didn't know you, Paula, although I knew of you. Word in the department was that Bick was head over heels in love with you. But I've lived long enough to know that true love is not a vaccination against temptation. Nurse Ellie embodied temptation. Anyone could see that your husband was a little immature and a lot flattered. Bick waved his hand, and Gladholder stopped talking. We had love, Paula. Ellie and me. One time. At one of those cheap motels down on the strip. I was in the news and full of myself and feeling entitled. She recognized me from the publicity and came on strong. I never gave you a thought. Never figured you'd find out. On our first day together, just after a visit to Chief Gladholder's hospital room, Ellie and I shacked up. We'd barely gotten off once before my cell phone rang. My sergeant was ordering me to see investigators downtown right away to answer some more questions about the Gladholder shooting. It was odd because I'd given a full statement already, and I never actually saw the attack in the first place. Weirder still, once I rushed down there, the detectives didn't have much to ask, but it sure spoiled my good time. 2 days later, as I was pulling into the motel with Ellie for a repeat, 2 patrol units cut us off in the parking lot. One of the officers quickly recognized me and apologized, explaining that someone in a car just like mine had been reported as brandishing a pistol a few blocks away. Ellie was too shaken up to keep going. I just took her back to her car. Before we could try again, I helped the chief get home from the hospital. Do you love your wife? He asked me out of the blue as we drove. He didn't wait for my answer before adding, because you either give her all your love or you don't. And if you don't, your marriage is doomed. Real love may come only once. Don't waste it. Upon hearing that, Paula moaned. The chief never told me that he knew I had strayed, Bick continued. Never admitted that he had intervened either. But I knew those interruptions weren't coincidences. I knew it, and I loved him like a father for it. Bick turned to Paula. I have no excuse. It was one time, really, and now years ago. I never did it again. Never wanted to. To be completely honest, I don't know how long it would have continued if the chief hadn't stepped in. But I never stopped loving you and never would have loved Ellie. I was so scared of losing you that I never confessed, although I came close a couple of times. Spent and sobbing, Bick stopped. Gladholder picked up the tale. I saw you the first time Bart brought you to the summit, he told Paula. He was a regular for a couple of years with different women, so we always noticed him. We didn't like what he was doing, but there wasn't much we could do about it. My heart sank when I recognized you. Paula, shivering and hugging herself, wept as the chief went on. You were the Wednesday girl, he said. Did you know there was also a Friday girl? That brought a sharp sob. The chief described waiting for a few weeks to see if the affair would stop. When it didn't, he finally did his duty to Bick. I would rather have been shot again than tell this boy what you were up to. Now it was the chief's eyes turning glassy. He was gone to the JTTF just 1 week later. I couldn't face you, Bick explained. I hated you. I was angry enough to kill Bart, but I couldn't say anything, couldn't do anything, because I was no better than you were. I couldn't judge you without admitting my fling and letting you judge me. I didn't know what else to do, so I left for time to think. And for you to think. I didn't know if I could get past what you did, and whether you could get past what I did. Paula wailed, moaning an apology that she hadn't recognized the warning signals. What would he have done, she asked, if she had heeded them and dumped Bart? What signals? Bick asked. His blank expression caused her to realize that the trick so obviously intended to derail her affair had started well before the chief told her husband about it. She and Bick simultaneously turned to Gladholder, who pursed his lips and nodded. Directing his eyes toward Paula, he said, "It worked on Bick. I thought it might work on you too." Glumly, he added, "I wish it had." Then he briefly summarized his moves to disrupt both illicit romances. Paula asked why Gladholder left out the part about moving her car at the counselor's office. "I don't know what you're talking about there," he replied. Bick just shrugged. The three sat quietly with their own thoughts for a minute or two before Gladholder stood and asked a one-word question. "Bick?" Accepting a nod for a reply, the older man strode out the door, pausing just long enough to say, "I wish you both the best." Then silence again. It felt like an hour passed in just 5 minutes. Neither spouse dared to start. Paula was frozen by the reality that she was the greater transgressor. Bick struggled with an unfamiliar reality. While his work made him the veteran of uncounted high-stakes confrontations, he always had the moral high ground. Until now. He broke first, after remembering that Paula had apologized, but he had not. "I am so sorry," he said. She studied his face. "You did nothing compared to me. You strayed once. Me, maybe 10 times? I am 10 times worse than you." After sobbing, she added, "What are we going to do?" "But I did it first," he countered. "Did you know?" No, I had no idea. I saw nothing." "I felt so guilty I figured you'd read it right off my face," Bick said. "I started every day wondering when you'd throw me out. I lay awake every night, imagining how quickly I'd have thrown you out if you did what I had done." Paula gasped. "Is that what you're going to do now? Throw me out?" "Of course not. How could I?" "Paula, if Gladholder hadn't stopped me, who knows how many times I might have been with Ellie." "Did you love her?" "No. Did you love him?" "Of course not." "Ego duck?" "Ego duck and nothing more." More silence as each searched the other's eyes for a map from here. "Was he better than me, Paula?" No, she replied, thinking to herself that while she knew she had to say that, it also was true. "What about her? Prettier?" "No," he answered, looking down and shaking his head as if to show that he had no idea why he did what he had done. Then both spoke at once, using the same words. "I love you." Their hug lasted forever, and their reconciliation kiss almost as long. Things were not completely fixed, they knew, but also not nearly as completely broken as they had feared. Bick and Paula reconnected for a whole week at the Summit Inn, compliments of a wise old cop who was grateful for his own second chance at life and delighted at an opportunity to pay it back.